Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Toulis.
I know you don't care, but your wife does. And sometimes your wife, who has her head on straight, she says, well, what's the word about David's bow tie today? And you leave off all the great discussions we've had talking with Eric Adkins about police reform and his suggestion that without police, we have chaos in the streets. You leave all that aside. You leave aside the comments of Joe Smith, and you leave aside the compelling discussion with Miracle Hurley, the competitor. And you say, well, David's bow tie today was the pink one with the bit of curl on it, the little bit of frayed material that his beloved Jeanette, with whom he has a date tonight, has not yet freight checked, and that'll satisfy her, right? Well, not really. This is David Toulis, and we are live at 92.7 FM and 95.3 FM HD4, the smartest guy with a bow tie. And I make a big deal out of that because it's such a minority taste to have the bow tie that you, my listener, if you are of the male persuasion, can be the leading person in your category of neckwear, whether it's a T-shirt, an open collared shirt, a sports shirt, or maybe just a regular tie. Or maybe you're wearing one of those Texan bolo strings around your neck with a bit of turquoise there in the center. And so you can be the leading party in your category because you've given me 5 minutes of your time here on the station where you report and the world decides. You report and the world decides. 800-8949, 800-8949, where you, my listener, the man with the smartphone, are a member of the esteemed class of people protected under the Federal Bill of Rights and the Tennessee Constitution Bill of Rights that says we have a free press, which means that your report matters. And we want those reports. We want those contacts. And partly because I really like helping people. I'm all about helping the individual attain justice. We have Thursday, according to Susan Bureau, and a word from the city court, a prosecution, I think it's a civil matter, of the first recalcitrant Airbnb patriot, right? The person who says, I'm going to run my Airbnb regardless. And what I would like to have known is that the ordinance for the Airbnb control is simply unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional on its face. And Russell Bean, who doesn't get much real law in his line of work in city court, or Mrs. Patey, they can do some real law on this one. Just looking up the statute with the ordinance and looking at the ban on arbitrary and capricious distinctions among like parties, which throws this ordinance out on his ear. Wade Hinton leaving his job, I think, this week, just in time to have that fall in pieces, perhaps, into the lap of the next city attorney. A bad piece of thinking, if there ever was one. A justification in the geopolitical sense. It is a justification of the earlier deceit, if you will, of zoning, which is an unlawful claim upon private property of the municipal corporation and its attendant bodies in planning agencies and counties, giving a false claim. Now we have a school board race coming up. I haven't given much attention to it, but I'm at Panera Bread Store in Hickson on Friday morning for Panera Posse. We round up the bad guys and put the money back in the bank. And I saw Joe Smith, and I said, "Joe, how's it going?" And he says that in his reply to the Unify Ed survey, that as far as its recommendations for, as he says, socioeconomic desegregation or integration based on poverty, not race, or integration based on poverty and race, little of this, he says, aligns with what I believe, what the people I represent believe, or what most people who live in Hamilton County believe. And he's running for the school board, which is you might say, a figurehead organization anymore, since we have national control of, it's called education, but really the government in Washington and that in Nashville doesn't control education. It controls schooling. Schooling is completely different. And in fact, I suggest it's contradictory to true education here in Chattanooga and Hamilton County. But anyway, it is a system that for which there is control in remote places, in boardrooms of think tanks and nonprofit organizations and philanthro-capitalist trusts and groups and NGOs, non-government organizations. They control what happens, and they're involved in a great social management experiment. And the school board locally is just a shell of what it used to be. It has minimal authority, minimal power to make changes, and yet there is you might say a simulacrum of democratic government. Right? We are to believe that if we have Joe Smith on the mic or on the board, that we have real government. Joe Smith, you are running for re-election. You've been 17 months on the school board. How is the race going? What are people, when you meet them, going door to door, what are they saying to you?
Well, we're encouraged because the response has been very, very positive. And David, 18 months ago now, when I was appointed by the county commission to fill Commissioner Greg Martin's unexpired seat, the day I walked in, we had an interim superintendent. We had just came off of the debacle at Ottawa High School. Shortly after that, we had
the broom handle rape case.
We had the tremendous, just heartbreaking tragedy that occurred at Woodmore. And it was budget time. And so that's what I walked into about 19 months ago. And so it's kind of been like getting a sip of water out of a fire hydrant. But we're encouraged, and the folks up in Hickson are encouraging me. So we're excited about what's going on and going to go on in District 3 public schools.
Well, what's new in the campaign for school board this cycle, Joe Smith, is the Unify Ed Political Action Committee, and it's a distinctly political theory, and it's apex paper and report seeking to bring what it calls equity into life in Chattanooga, but also, as it's arguing for, into the school system. Talk about how this organization is forcing you to react, or giving you some good ideas, or giving you perhaps a way of contrasting yourself with conflicting concepts to you, Joe Smith.
Well, David, right after I first came on the board, Jonas Barris came to me and told me that Unified Ed was going to launch this Apex study on equity. And I'll never forget, I said to him that day that we had bigger fish to fry, in other words, bigger issues that I felt like we need to take immediate look at. Rather than equity. You know, equity is a very divisive term. I like to think of it in terms of the way our new superintendent has framed it. Let's look at ways to close the opportunity gap. And we have some of those that we need to do some work on. But this Apex study has been very divisive. I'm very much in disagreement with what they're not even making suggestions, they're making demands. And, you know, they're asking,
such as,
well,
what's in demand?
Social economic desegregation, if you will. It is not the school board's responsibility to break up centers of poverty. That's just not our job as the school board. So that's one thing I'm very against.
Well, cannot the school board mitigate or reduce the damage in its, as long as it has children in loco parentis 8 hours a day at least, cannot it do something to favor these poor children and their disadvantaged backgrounds?
Well, I think we're doing a lot of that already, David. And, you know, I say all the time, and I'm a real advocate for teachers, although the teachers union didn't see it that way. I've always supported and advocated for teachers. But here's the thing. The classroom teacher has to be a parent, has to be the nurse, has to be the social worker, has to be the disciplinarian, has to do all those things. And somewhere along the line, they get to teach classroom. My goodness, it's not the school system's job to be parents. So my biggest concern is we got to get parents to step up and be parents. And those single moms that are working 2 and 3 jobs, those are the people that the community has got to get involved in and help those moms.
Well, you agree with public schools as a concept. The government control of education ostensibly, but schooling for sure. And are there not answers to these children coming to school unprepared and unwilling? They're getting no encouragement from their parents, who, of course, by the very existence of public schools, are discouraged from caring at all about their children, because you have their care is in the hands of experts.
Well, David, listen, my wife and I, 43 years, I'm married to Miss America, by the way. We have 2 children of our own, biological children, and we've raised 19 foster children. I want you to hear what I'm about to say. When we'd have those foster kids come into our home, they had behavior problems. They were behind in school. They had truancy issues, all kinds of problems. Once they came into our home, almost every one of them, we would always ask, do you want to stay in school where you're at now, or do you want to go to one of the Hickson schools where we live? Most of the time, those children would say, well, I want to stay where I go to school. That's where my friends are at, and we would let them. I'll never forget, 2006, we had 8 kids in our home. My wife went to 8 different schools in the morning, dropping kids off, would pick them up in the afternoon. Now, here's what's important. Those children, after being in our home for a while, their grades began to improve. Their behavior problems were non-existent, but they're still in the same schools with the same friends, but their life had begun to change. Why? Because they had stability, encouragement, accountability in the home. So it's got to start at home. Education is from the womb to the grave. So it's got to start with the parent.
So your argument for keeping your office, Joe Smith, is that you have lived out the reforms that really have to happen in an area outside of your authority, and that is the family. You don't have, as a school board member and a school board, you have no authority over into the homes of families. But there, you're suggesting, is where these reforms have to take place, and it's not your legal authority, your legal power, and you're not the church. You don't have a diaconate to make those things happen. But you are an example of how this reform in culture should take place. The demands seem to be made by Unify Ed.
Well, David, we can, as a community, we need to be involved. And I say it all the time, and a lot of people make fun of me for saying it, but I think we need to get up every single day and look for somebody to love on. And then loving on somebody means encouraging them, taking them to a ball game, taking them to a movie, just being their friend, helping them in any way you can. And every single day that I'm breathing, I'm going to be doing that. And if everybody in Chattanooga, and especially the Christian community, would take that attitude and just be the hands of Jesus to the world, we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
Well, what is equity that would help these children in the school system? The Unify Ed and your opponent, your challenger, Miracle Hurley. She represents that concept. What in your mind is true about that concept, and how is there an advantage in discussing it?
Well, again, David, I don't want to talk about it in terms of equity. I want to talk about it in terms of closing the opportunity gap. And we've got some work to do. We've got some schools that kids don't have access to AP classes. Now, we got to fix that. That's not okay. But let me tell you, we've invested a lot of dollars, a lot of resources into our opportunity zone schools, into our partnership zone schools. And there's going to come a time when the taxpayers in Chattanooga are going to say, enough is enough. We got to see some results. So I'm excited about some of the reforms that Dr. Johnson has already brought, and the board has pretty much given him about everything he's asked for, and we're supporting him. So there's going to come a time when the taxpayer is going to expect some results.
Are there positions or votes made by the board where you stand apart from the rest, Joe Smith? Are there funding that you want to have done, which the board says no to, or is there funding that the board is giving that you disapprove of?
Well,
how are you standing apart from the crowd?
Let me go back about 20 months when I first came on the board. And David, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I understand how to balance the checkbook. And I'll never forget the first budget that we worked on. Dr. Kelly, at that time, the interim superintendent, presented us with a budget that was $19 million upside down. Well, again, I know how to balance.
Wait, what does that mean, upside down?
Meaning that budget that Dr. Kelly wanted to carry to the county commission was $19 in the $19 million in the negative. Well, I pitched a fit about that and demanded that the staff, Dr. Kelly, go back and bring us a budget that was balanced, and they did. And we were able to get most of the board to come along with me, but there were some that didn't want to. But anyway, that passed. So we presented the county commission last year with the first balanced budget in over a decade. Well, let me fast forward a little bit to this past fall. I believe that began the process of the taxpayers in Chattanooga to start to build a little bit of trust in the school board, that we're being fiscally responsible. So in September of last year, the county commission voted to keep the millage rate the same. That freed up about $125 million for us to do some deferred maintenance, to build some new schools. So that trust with the public and the school board, I believe, after a long, long time, is beginning to be rebuilt. So I'm very proud of that. We've got to be physically responsible with what the taxpayers give us to operate on. Let me just add this caveat. Do we need more money? Well, everybody needs more money, but the reality is we've got to be good stewards of what the taxpayers have given us, and then we got to produce results. And that means we got to see some academic improvement with our children in Hamilton County.
Is there any way that the school board can anticipate the loss to the schooling concept from the internet? Some say that the PDF has made schools really passé, distinct, obsolete. The fact that courses, all kinds of things are available for free. Why do we have this hugely expensive system, $9,000 per student, paid for by the taxpayer? Is there some way that the board can shift toward a more open offering rather than these confining schools?
Well, I'm all about open enrollment. I think that a child, a parent ought to have choice. And if they want to go to a school that's outside of their zone, anywhere in Hamilton County, they should have that right. Now, there's got to be room in that school that they choose to go to, number one, because the zone kids get first choice. And then number two, they got to find a way to get there because transportation is a big issue. We have some great programs. We need to really dial down and look at programs that are working and continue to encourage and fund those programs. But we probably got things that aren't working so well. And those are the kinds of things we need to eliminate.
Can you be specific?
Well, I don't know what those are, at this time, especially since we're just launching the 20 Future Ready Institutes that everybody seems to be excited about.
What do those institutes do?
Well, if you can think back, David, and you're old enough to remember this, but the old Kirkman High School, where a young person could go to high school, and the day he got his high school diploma, he also got his electrical license. So he's able to go into the community. He's able to get a good paying job and have a career. Well, we're going to have 20 of those such institutes scattered all across Hamilton County, everything from healthcare to agriculture to media.
That's
to
not
aviation.
exactly vocational education.
Well, it is in a sense, David, because if I'm a ninth grader and I want to be a CNA, for example, a nursing assistant, well, the day that I graduate from high school and I get my high school diploma, I also am a certified nursing assistant. I can go right across the street from Memorial Auditorium where I just got my diploma and get a job at Erlanger Hospital.
What is your take on Sheriff Hammond's tending to favor the armed citizen and teachers having their private weapons after some training versus SROs in more school with the huge expense of that larger payroll for the sheriff?
Well, let me correct you there, David, because I don't believe that Sheriff Hammond wants to arm teachers at all. I do know that Sheriff Hammond wants to have all options on the table. We did some things to improve school safety. We did some things in this budget to do that. We've got to do more. In our budget, HCDE budget, we're going to bring in several more resource officers. Sheriff Hammond is doing the same thing. We changed all of our entryways into our buildings to make that process safer, but we hadn't done enough. We got to do more. But I need to correct you. I know Sheriff Hammond wants to do anything that he can.
Well, he seems to favor the armed citizen concept.
I don't agree with that. I don't think he does. I think he just wants to have that on the table.
Well, thanks for the clarification. Joe Smith, I'll have to ask him for an update.
You ask him about that.
So your your general point on security and safety is what, Joe Smith?
We haven't done enough. We got to continue to do better. We need a resource officer in every school in Hamilton County. I think that's another way that the public can step up.
Is that a way that students can learn to be free, or are they going to learn to be compliant when you have a school resource officer?
Well, those resource officers, I mean, they're very present in case you have some kind of emergency, but the resource officers I know, they become friends and they become like another parent, another counselor to those students. And that's important.
We have a caller. What's on your mind? You have a second. Hang on, this is David Tullis. Caller, we'll be right on just a second. We're talking with Joe Smith. Joe, you're running for re-election of the school board. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, David, for having me.
David Tullis, we're here on Radio 97 FM, and Joe Smith is on the ballot for the school board, and long dealing with foster children in his house for many, many years. Boots on the ground care for young people. Now, I've got some important messages. Tune in.
3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
One man killed, 2 others injured after a crash on Suck Creek Road. John Redmond from Marion County was killed when his car collided with another vehicle on Saturday. Reports say he lost control of his vehicle, crossed the center line while negotiating a curve on a winding road. 2 people in Grundy County were arrested after deputies busted a meth lab. 38-year-old P.J. Thomas and 31-year-old Jonah Morris were arrested when deputies stopped them in the parking lot of their apartment building. Officers say they found 4 grams of meth, a gun, and a meth lab. Thomas faces aggravated assault charge on top of the drugs and weapons charges. And 2 campers went missing in Murray County. The sheriff's office had launched a search for the 2 after they failed to return on Saturday. The 2 campers were a father and son, 40 and 10 years old, respectively. The Murray County Sheriff's Office says the 2 were found safe and sound and appear both in good shape. Val St. John for Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7, Action News Now.
Sam Jordan, News Talk 92.7, Action Sports Now. 4-star Tennessee defensive line signee Brant Lawless of Nashville Christian School has been granted a release from his signed national letter of intent with the Vols, according to sources with Go Vols 24/7 on Sunday night. He was one of 2 Tennessee signees who had yet to arrive in Knoxville, now is expected to explore other options for his football future, according to sources. A 6'3", 285-pound Lawless signed with the Vols in December after being committed to them for more than 7 months, sticking with Tennessee through the transition from former coach Butch Jones to first-year head coach Jeremy Pruitt. Lawless was one of 6 defensive linemen in the 2018 class who signed with the Vols, but wasn't able to enroll at Tennessee this summer while finishing some academic requirements. Kevin Harvick won the NASCAR New Hampshire 301 on Sunday afternoon, edging out Kyle Busch and Eric Almirola. Sam Jordan, News Talk 92.7, Action Sports Now.
Nooga Radio.
Roar into Talladega.
Hello? Who am I speaking with? Eric, you're our winner. Really?
You'll receive tickets for all 3 races between the Camping World Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Monster Energy Cup races.
Holy cow.
In